BBC Radio London.
Lovely listener, welcome back to BBC Radio London's Breakfast Show with me, Vanessa Feltz. The time 8:17, and this is a most tragic story. An inquest jury has condemned the actions of police and healthcare staff in relation to the death of 23-year-old Olaseni Lewis in 2010. Olaseni died after being restrained at the Bethlehem Psychiatric Hospital. Scotland Yard has apologised to his family, who have waited for 7 years to find out the truth about his death. And I'm joined in the studio by his parents, Aji and Conrad Lewis. Thank you for coming and welcome. And Deborah Coles, the director of the charity Inquest. I mean, for you, 7 years to reach this point, what a dreadful ordeal you must have been through.
It's affected the whole family. You know, we've got other children and grandchildren and friends. It's been a really long journey.
Do you mind telling us the circumstances by which Olaseni ended up in that hospital? What was going on in his life at the time?
Well, as a family, and with his, he too wanted to go to the hospital because he'd had a psychotic episode. And we took him, and he ended up at Bethlehem. We took him there. We left about 8:30. And about...
let me just ask you what kind of state he was in when he was admitted.
Oh, he was agitated.
A psychotic episode.
Highly agitated.
Was he hearing voices? Was it that type of thing? Or what was happening with him?
Not so much the hearing of voices, but full of energy. Agitated, up and down the stairs, not stopping to...
Was this the first kind of time that he'd had that sort of episode?
Yes, it was.
Oh, right. Yeah. So it's not as if it had been going on for years and you were used to it.
First time.
Oh, I see. How frightening for everybody. And not least him. He must have been terrified.
Yes.
So you see your son in a state of terrible agitation and you realise you can't contain him at home. This is not going to be, this is not going to work. And he realises it too. So he's not so psychotic that he doesn't know that he's very disturbed. And so you think, right, well, what we need is a proper environment where they can assess him.
That's right.
And it's not as if this had been going on for years. Oh, how frightening for everybody. Yes. So you place him in the care of the medical staff at the Bethlehem, assuming that he's in the right place and you've done the best any parent could do for their child, which is all any of us are ever trying to do, let's face it.
Right, yeah.
So this was in the morning, and so then what happened next?
No, it was in the evening.
This was in the evening.
Okay. We left after visiting about 8:30. We left, and something said to me, try and stay in the car park, or and I said to my daughter, I think I'll sleep in the car in the car park.
Do you know why you felt like that?
I don't know. Just something prompted me. Yeah,
oh, dear.
I was uneasy, and she said, "No, Mom, come home. You've had a long day. You haven't slept for a few days." And so I did. And we had a call from his best friend who'd called the hospital to see how he was settling down. And they said there'd been an incident and we should all go to Mayday Hospital. And he said, well, have you called his mother? No, we can't find her number. But I saw her number being written on a file. Anyway, we went to Mayday and he was on life support.
And what did they tell you at that time had happened? What did they say had gone on?
They told us initially that when he was admitted to Royal Bethlehem, he was under the impression, or he was told or admitted as a voluntary patient.
Right.
So at a time in the evening, he decided he wanted to leave. They wouldn't let him leave. So he got a bit agitated and kicked in the door.
Okay.
So the police were called. Eventually 14 or 11 police officers eventually came. There were at least 3 restraining periods. One by the medical staff and then 2 by the police. The last one lasted about 45 minutes, which 11 police officers restraining a single man, 45 minutes.
I mean, what did you learn at the time had happened? Because you must have been in such profound shock that you're delivering this able-bodied young man who, as you say, in a state of agitation, has been running up and down the stairs. So he's obviously physically fit, although mentally troubled at this point. And the next minute, you're receiving this appalling news that he's on life support. What did they say had happened to make the transition between one thing and another?
At the time, and probably up till the inquest, the full truth had not been told. He had he got rampant. They held him down. He collapsed.
Right.
That was the story.
And did you think, I mean, as you were saying that she had this feeling that she shouldn't really leave,
she
obviously
had,
a very strong instinct, and we hear very often about a mother's and a father's. I mean, they're an instinct. You have a feeling and you can't explain it, but you have a feeling. When they started to tell you what they said had happened, what did you think of that?
Well, do you know how we found out? A little extra. The Evening Standard had been phoned by somebody in the hospital. There was a whistleblower. And I saw, they were at the gate, and I thought, what are you doing? Because they were knocking on neighbours' doors. And he said to me, do you know what happened to your son? And by this time he was on life support, and we were just getting ready to go and, spend the day and the night with him. And they published something that, told us that this wasn't an ordinary collapse. It had been through because of police restraint. So that is how we knew a little bit more from the Evening Standard.
I cannot really bear to even ask you to recount what actually happened and what was there, because I just can't bear it, because it's your son we're talking about. It's just unbearable to even think of you having to envisage it, let alone describe it on the radio. But when you found out, as we have now found out, what actually happened, and that Scotland Yard 7 long years later has finally apologised for something that I'm not even sure how you apologise for something like that, really.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I just don't know what your thoughts or feelings are after all this time. What do you think when you think about this?
As a family, we just take each day as it comes, really. That's what we can do. Because of our Christian faith, we you're told to forgive. So you forgive, you never forget, and you just move on as best you can. But it's been so difficult because we've had a fight on our hands from day one. The IPCC let us down badly, the CPS let us down, the police were obstructing us.
Do you have any ideas why? Why do you feel you've been so badly let down? What do you think?
Maybe what's come out at the inquest, maybe the evidence, is so bad. It speaks for itself. So I'm
gonna bring Deborah in on this. Deborah Cole's the director of the charity inquest, because I almost feel like I'd rather hear it from you than from his parents about what happened and what your take on it is at the charity.
I mean, it's one of the most shocking cases that inquest has had to deal with, and I think for me, and I've paid tribute to this family before, but you quite rightly have said that they've suffered 7 years of obstacles being put in the way of the truth coming out, and and I think Adju's absolutely right, because the truth is extremely damning about failures of both mental health services and the police. And the evidence speaks for itself. A very, very vulnerable man who needed professional care and support because he was in crisis was effectively restrained to death in a mental health setting while medical staff looked on, even at the point at which he had collapsed.
What is the difference between restrained to death and killed?
Well, absolutely, and I suppose this raises a fundamental question about why it is that there have not been criminal charges brought in this case, and some of the disquiet I think there is around deaths in custody, where there is overwhelming evidence of excessive and unreasonable force. The jury narrative in this inquest is absolutely damning at every level. And so the family are very much hoping that the Crown Prosecution Service will re-look at this case. But I think it also raises questions about how we hold people responsible, accountable, because what this family have suffered, sadly, is not an isolated experience. There have been a pattern of restraint-related deaths, both before Shaney died and since Shaney died. And it does raise questions about the use of restraint and about how we learn from these awful tragedies.
I don't even know quite what restraint means. Obviously, we're people listening to this are thinking 11 police officers, one extremely vulnerable man. What could they have done to him? And as you say, witnessed by medical staff. So it's not as if they were in a cell under the ground somewhere in a police station and actually nobody could see except other police officers. That's not the environment. You've got nurses, and as you say, that whistleblower who must have contacted the Evening Standard, who must have been horrified. But the idea of each of them countenancing that kind of behaviour, so each other police officer not stopping the other police officers, and the medical staff not intervening, and the nurses, and the it is just horrifying to anybody even attempting to envisage it, let alone his family.
Absolutely, and it's as if they lost sight of Shaney as a human being.
Yes.
Because let's remind ourselves as well that he was in mechanical restraints as well. He was in 2 sets of handcuffs. His legs and his arms were in leg restraints and arm restraints. So, it's deeply, deeply distressing to even... And you have to question...
And we hear of the police officers sitting on his chest, sitting on him. Sitting on him. His legs were bent back and they were sitting on him. They were doing a cell extraction, in a hospital.
Bruises on his shoulder, bruises on his thighs.
Yes, and then at the end, when his body went limp, they thought he was faking it. So they left the room, the door locked, they had to find the keys, get back in and do CPR, so he was dead. I mean, it's beyond all comprehension, isn't it, that such a thing could possibly occur. I am so terribly, terribly sorry to hear it from you and to subject you to telling the story. And do you think, Deborah, that there might be further consequences, that the CPS might be prevailed upon to take up this case again?
I mean, that we have to, let's see what happens. I don't have much confidence because there's never been a successful prosecution of police officers in any case like this. But I think very much what this family hope is that there was a review by the then commissioned by the then Home Secretary Theresa May after Shaney died, because she was so concerned to hear about their experiences and the family of Sean Rigg about the protracted legal process and the difficult circumstances in which a number of young black men have lost their lives.
Well, you've said the word, and I was just about to, because I didn't think I could let this finish without saying it. I mean, obviously we've now heard the phrase Black Lives Matter, which emanated from America, and lots of people here said, well, it doesn't apply here. Yes, okay, in America we've seen what happens, but not here. Some people said that. Other people felt that they had personal experience of how it can and does apply over here. Do you feel, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, that there has been that is a permutation of it, that race affected it because he was a black man rather than just a man?
I think so.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yes.
And you think so just because you feel that there was a kind of casual disregard for his humanity here?
That's right, yeah.
Based on the fact that he's a black man. Yes. Oh, this is just awful. I have to go to the news headlines. I can't thank you enough for coming in. And, obviously our hearts go out to you. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely listener, we'll be back with you after the news headlines.